Hey, welcome to Big Picture Monday. My name is Cali Black, here with all the context you need to totally rock this week's Come Follow Me readings. This week we are studying Alma, chapters 17 through 22. It is July 1st. These stories this week are so good. You could probably tell a lot of them on your own without me, but I'm going to help you see how they all connect together and they're woven and some interesting connections. It's gonna be a good week. It's also a good week because it's the start of the third quarter of Come Follow Me, so pull out your brand new study guides. I love just opening up a new study guide and creasing it open, so pull that out. Time to start on the first week. If you have the digital file, open it up. It's not quite as satisfying as creasing a new book, but we can make it work. If you haven't gotten yours yet, you can still totally get it this week, and Amazon will ship it to you in a couple days. So if you're on YouTube, check the links below. If you're on Instagram, click my bio and you'll get the links there, or check my stories. I'll have them there as well. Or you can download it right now and you'll have it ready to go. Okay, let's dive into these great stories. We have been talking about Alma. We're in the book of Alma. It's been so great learning about him. Last week we learned about the terrible things that happened in Ammon, but Alma and Amulek met up. We know that Zeezrom was converted, and we ended up in just this beautiful place that Mormon wrote that the Spirit of the Lord was being poured out upon the land. Like, things were good in the church at this point. And so as we start chapter 17, Alma is now headed off to the next city. He's doing his little missionary trip, right? And as he's headed to the next city, he runs into the sons of Mosiah. Now, these sons of Mosiah are the ones who were with Alma, the younger, when they had their dramatic conversion story. They were all trying to destroy the church. They all got converted together. And then Alma stuck around in Zarahemla, and he became the high priest and even the chief judge for a bit. But you'll remember the sons of Mosiah went to their dad, Mosiah, who was the king of the land. He was the last king. And they said, we want to serve a mission to the Lamanites. And Mosiah took that to the Lord. The Lord said, yes, let them go. And so King Mosiah let his sons go on their missions. King Mosiah has now died at this point. And they run into their good friend, Alma. Now, guess how long it's been since they first left on their missions? 14 years. 14 years they have been gone on their missions, and now they run into Alma, and they are so happy to see him. They're actually really, really happy to see him because they need to ask him something, but we'll find that out in a couple of weeks. Because right now, we're now going to start a flashback. It's a very simple flashback. We're just going to find out what the sons of Mosiah have been up to for the past 14 years. So we are going to now flashback and follow their journey. It's almost as if they're just having a story time there, and Alma's like, what have you been up to? And Ammon's like, well, let me tell ya. So we started off, right? Like, this is what's going on. So the sons of Mosiah, and we know a few other people were with them as well. They head into the land of the Lamanites. This is 14 years prior. And as they get into the land of the Lamanites, they all separate, having faith that God will bring them together again. Now, again, put a little pinpoint here, because we're now going to follow Ammon's story. Ammon is one of the sons of Mosiah, but we're going to come back in just a few chapters and we're going to follow Aaron's story from this same point, okay? But we're going to start with Ammon. Now, this is the story that you could probably tell me just as well as I can tell you, but it's such a good one. So Ammon, he goes to this place called the land of Ishmael, and he meets the king there, whose name is King Lamoni. And King Lamoni just instantly loves Ammon and is like, you should marry my daughter. And Ammon's like, actually, I just want to be your servant. And Lamoni's like, okay, you can be my servant. And so he puts him in charge of, has him watch his flocks. So they're out one day with the other servants, and this group of robbers come in and they scatter the flocks. And the king's servants are so terrified because they know that the king is going to kill them. And Ammon sees this and he says, I can show them a miracle right here. Their hearts can be softened in this moment. And so he comforts them And then the robbers come back again, and Ammon takes matters into his own hands, and he defends the flocks using stones, sling, as well as a sword, chops off some arms, and they bring that all back to the king. Now, chapter 18, these guards go and tell King Lamoni what just happened, and Lamoni is shocked. He instantly thinks that Ammon must be some great spirit. Now, Ammon isn't there because he is preparing the king's horses for an event that the king needs to be going to that we'll actually learn about soon. Eventually, King Lamoni asks Ammon to be brought in, and Lamoni can't even find his words. He doesn't even know what he wants to ask, and eventually Ammon is able to discern through the spirit what Lamoni is concerned about, and he just starts to preach to him. He's preaching about the creation and all about God, and Lamoni is completely converted. He is overcome with the spirit, and Lamoni collapses to the ground. Now, I want to point out, has Ammon ever seen someone be overcome with the spirit and collapse to the ground? Yeah, his good friend Alma the Younger. He saw this exact same thing happen. So Ammon knows. He knows what's going on. Now, chapter 19, the queen now comes to Ammon and is starting to get a little concerned. She's like, when will my husband wake up? And Ammon says, tomorrow. He'll wake up tomorrow. And sure enough, the next day, the king wakes up and he starts to preach. He starts to preach and talk about how he's been converted, and everyone is overjoyed. The queen and the king are overcome with the spirit again, and they fall to the ground. And Ammon is overcome with the spirit, and he falls to the ground. And then all the other servants in the room are overcome with the spirit, and they all fall to the ground, except for one person, and this is Abish. She is not overcome with the spirit to the point of falling to the ground, and she already knows about Jesus because of a great vision that her father had had previously. So she knew what was going on, and she knew the Lord, and she was like, this is it. Everyone else is going to be converted too. So she goes around and she gathers everyone. You've got to come see. You've got to come see what's going on. And they come to this scene where everyone is lying down on the ground, including Ammon. And very clearly they misinterpret what's going on. They think that Ammon has killed them, and chaos starts to break out. In fact, one of the Lamanites goes to kill Ammon, and he is struck dead as he does this. Abish realizes things are totally out of control, and so she goes to the queen, and she touches the queen's hand and wakes her up. And the queen then wakes her husband up, and they are able to then pacify everyone and preach. Everyone is woken up. Ammon preaches to everyone, and he converts and baptizes so many people there in the land of Ishmael. Such a great story. Now, chapter 20, remember I talked about how Ammon was preparing Lamoni's horses for a trip. King Lamoni says, hey, I've got to go. I'm supposed to go on this trip to go meet my dad. And my dad happens to be king of all the Lamanites. We don't ever learn King Lamoni's dad's name, by the way, so he's just the king or King Lamoni's dad. I've got to go meet him. I have a feast. And Ammon is warned in a dream, don't go meet King Lamoni's dad because he will try to kill you. And also, you need to go to Middoni because your brothers are in prison there and they're suffering. And so Ammon goes to the king and is like, listen, I can't go meet your father. My brethren are in Middoni. They're in prison. I just saw this in a dream. I've got to go save them. And Lamoni's like, actually, I've got some political influence. Why don't I come with you? I can definitely get your brothers released out of prison in Middoni. I'm just going to skip this feast with my father. And Ammon's like, cool, great. So Ammon and King Lamoni, they start heading off to Middoni. And as they're traveling, guess who they run into? King Lamoni's father. He happens to be there, and he is offended and furious that his son skipped the feast that he was supposed to go to. And they start talking, and it gets to the point where King Lamoni's father is so angry, he tries to kill his son, Lamoni, but he's not able to. So then he turns the sword on Ammon for converting his son, right? And he's not able to kill Ammon. Ammon is actually overpowers this old king, and eventually gets the king to give his son permission to just do his own thing in the land. Like, sure, you can have your own religion in the land of Ishmael. I'll let you do this. It's like his heart was softened a little bit, but really Ammon just overpowered him. And that's it. They're free to go. King Lamoni's father goes. Lamoni and Ammon continue on to Madoni. They find Ammon's brothers in prison who have been just tortured. They don't have food, terrible conditions, but they are able to free the brothers out of prison. Now, chapter 21, let's rewind back and follow Aaron's journey. So these brothers and other people are splitting off to start their missionary trips. Let's see what Aaron is up to. Aaron goes to not the land of Ishmael, but the land of Jerusalem. And Jerusalem is filled with Amalekites. Amalekites, we actually don't know a ton about their origin, other than we know they were Nephites who then hardened their hearts and like defected over to the Lamanites. And so Aaron has zero success. These people have such hard hearts because they were Nephites and now they're Lamanites. No progress at all. He meets up with other of his brethren or the other people that were with them, and they just have no success. They end up getting thrown in prison in Madoni, and everything is withheld from them. And then finally, Ammon, their brother, along with a king, King Lamoni, come and rescue them out of prison. They're very happy. But now we're going to continue on with Aaron's story, because we learn that Aaron and the other brothers that were with him, they start to have a little bit more success. They're starting to preach and people are listening a little bit more now. And we learn that Ammon and King Lamoni go back to the land of Ishmael and they start to fully establish a church and they have total religious freedom and all this success. And then chapter 22, our final chapter for this week, Aaron and his brethren eventually make it to the land of Nephi. Now, the land of Nephi, think of it as like the capital city for the Lamanites. The land of Nephi is like to the Lamanites as the land of Zarahemla is to the Nephites. And so they go to the land of Nephi, and who lives in the land of Nephi? King Lamoni's father, this unnamed father. He lives there. Now, King Lamoni's father has not been able to get the incident with his son and Ammon out of his mind. He was very heavily impressed by the love that Ammon showed his son, King Lamoni's son, King Lamoni, that he showed his son. And he was like very troubled by this. And so when he learns that Aaron, who's one of Ammon's brothers, is in the land and is like wants to preach to him, King Lamoni's father is like, please come, tell me, preach to me, tell me what made Ammon so different, because there was something very different about him. And Aaron sees that his heart is ready to be softened, and Aaron starts to preach, and King Lamoni's father is converted and he's overcome with the Spirit, and he falls to the ground as well. Lots of parallels to what Ammon experienced here. Except that's kind of where it ends, because the queen walks in and she is not understanding and happy. She starts to panic and she thinks that Aaron and his brothers just killed her husband. Aaron realizes this is gonna go into chaos real fast, and so he actually wakes up King Lamoni's father pretty quickly, and he wakes up and is able to pacify everyone and says, I have been converted. Now, that's where we end on the story. There's actually one last part of that chapter, which goes back to Mormon. Remember, Mormon is the actual author. He's the one writing what we're reading. Hundreds of years in the future, he's got the plates of Nephi, and he's abridging them, which just means he's rewriting them and summarizing them, condensing them. He's given us all the most interesting parts, right? And he gives us a little geography lesson, which is kind of fun at the end of chapter 22. If you have my study guide, you can look at the map that Sarah from All of That Designs designed. Of course, this is just an artist representation, but you can try and see how that all fits together. I think it's just interesting to kind of play around with. Okay, that's it. It's your turn. Dive into these super fun and engaging stories. Great chapters. I think my personal focus question, I love this contrast between what Ammon experienced at first and what Aaron experienced at first. And there's a scripture where it says, now it happened to have been Aaron's lot to have fallen among a more hardened people. And I just think, man, we all get different lots in life. And our lots just happen to be drastically different, and they don't reflect on our righteousness or our past, and yet we can still face them with faith. All right, have a great week and happy studying.